All right. Hi, everybody. PTSDog here. Um, little, uh, little distracted for a second. I apologize. We're going to have a special guest join us on the live Q&A. Um, but we're doing it a little low tech because we're still working out some issues as far as trying to share a shot on Facebook. I'm going to do the same thing I did last week, and I'm going to start with something that I've written, and that way it gives people time to come in and everything, and then we'll get into the Q&A from there, and hopefully our guest will give us a holler here shortly, and he'll join in when we start doing the Q&A. I posted this December 13th, and it's it's something that I think is important to reiterate and share. So forgive me for reading something that you may have already read, but it's something I want to discuss as we get started today. One of the arguments many mental health professionals at the VA have used to dispute the effectiveness of a PTSD service dog is calling a PTSD service dog a crutch. Um, so is a crutch or a prosthetic limb or the mind-numbing zombie drugs, the zombie cocktail of prescription drugs that most VA psychiatrists rely on to treat PTSD. Um, Personal testimony shared with me from multiple sources has convinced me that rather than a crutch, the training and use of service dogs in PTSD, treatment of PTSD symptoms, is the surest way to provide handlers with an opportunity to actually begin to thrive in spite of the disability. For example, and I wrote up a visit to the grocery store. So I made up this veteran, Tom. Tom's a veteran who suffers from PTSD. Since his symptoms began, Tom finds that he panics in crowded spaces and any place that he does not have a clear line of sight at all times. The grocery store is a perfect storm of triggers for Tom, who, upon entering one, finds himself quickly overwhelmed, immediately hypervigilant, and prone to overreaction when faced with what non-PTSD sufferers would call a normal situation. In the first scenario, Tom has been taking the zombie meds that the VA prescribes, and although he can now walk into a grocery store, he's forgotten why he got there. He's numb uh, to his surroundings, confused by the noise, and unsure of what's going on. Upon exiting the store, after forgetting half of what he was sent to get, he spends almost as much time outside looking for his truck as he did spending time in the store shopping. Although he did not have a panic attack or a rage attack because of his PTSD, because he's on the zombie drugs, Tom was not successful when he went on his shopping trip. And this caused friction at home because he forgot half the ingredients he was supposed to pick up for dinner. In the second scenario, instead of zombie drugs, let's give Tom a PTSD service dog. Tom's been working with the dog and training it for more than 2 years. Fido is the dog's name, picks up on Tom's stressors and takes specific trained actions or tasks to assist in heading off Tom's PTSD symptoms. The work that Tom has put into training Fido has forced him to undergo some very deep introspection, and now Tom understands what conditions cause his distress. Tom has trained Fido to keep him grounded, to be aware of his situation and surroundings, while not being overwhelmed by them. Tom and Fido walk into the store, and Fido immediately comes to a close heel, frequently brushing against Tom's legs as they walk the aisles, reminding Tom of his presence. Knowing Fido will alert him to anyone approaching without his knowledge eases Tom's mind, and he allows him to relax a little and keep the hypervigilance at bay. In addition, when an aisle becomes crowded, Tom has trained Fido to block, using his body to physically create a barrier between him and other people, maintaining enough personal space for Tom to function without feeling too crowded. Tom and Fido work together as a team. Tom needs only to use minimal commands for his service dog because Fido anticipates his handler's needs. Because Tom and Fido have trained through these situations for 2 years or more, the two move and function almost as a single unit. While standing in line to pay the cashier, Fido sits at Tom's side, facing the rear, covering his six. Tom doesn't have to worry about watching his six because Fido's doing it for him. Unless Fido alerts to someone approaching from that area, Tom can comfortably keep his attention focused on ringing up his purchases and loading his cart. Tom pays, the last bags go into the cart, and they head towards the door. But Tom has forgotten where he parked again. No problem. He tells Fido to find the truck. Fido confidently leads him straight to the vehicle, load the groceries in, head home, job well done. Now, is this a crutch, or is this a tool that Tom is able to use as a PTSD sufferer and able to regain some independence and the ability to perform normal, what people would say are normal everyday tasks? PTSD can be as debilitating an affliction as an amputation, except you can't see PTSD. How can you argue that one of the most powerful tools available to a veteran who suffers from PTSD is a crutch, but at the same time argue that a artificial limb for somebody who's lost a foot or a leg, say, is not? How can you call both of them a disability but not recognize the effectiveness of the tools available to both of these individuals, one who would be an amputee and one with PTSD? Just as the amputee spends countless hours relearning how to walk, the PTSD sufferer spends countless hours relearning how to function despite their new mental reality. Both have an assisted device. The amputee, an artificial limb; the PTSD sufferer, a service dog. I have heard the crutch argument. Quite frankly, I find it demeaning, and it begs the question: what's the purpose of these doctors who use the crutch argument rather than looking at it as a tool and a possible way to save lives? So with that, our special guest is going to Skype in. I'm sorry you're not going to be able to see him, but you should be able to hear him. Go ahead and give us a call there, DV6, and we'll get started with the Q&A. Maybe. Well, I'll go ahead and get started with the Q&A. But first, a couple of announcements. First of all, there he is. There he is. Put you on speaker. Hey, can you hear me? All righty. Guests, can you guys hear? Can you hear DV6? Say something, Six.
1, 2, 3. I like mashed potatoes.
The mashed potatoes are good. Can you guys hear him? Sounds like it. The elf lynch mob probably isn't done with you, they say. Yes, they can hear you. Okay. That's going to follow you everywhere, man. Mm-hmm.
Informing people of facts and issues related to service dogs, but here we go again because somebody has a differing opinion on whether or not it's a crutch or not.
Mm-hmm.
It's not the point. I'll tell you, even if a guy's not diagnosed with PTSD, if that dog, because he couldn't get to the hospital, get diagnosed, or he can't get to the VA because they're waiting for him to die. But if that dog or animal is going to get that guy out, or female out of the house to get day-to-day activities done, who cares?
Absolutely, absolutely. Well,
go ahead.
The way the law is written is it's important to understand that yes, it is absolutely best to have a diagnosis of PTSD. However, what the ADA actually says is that a person is disabled if they have a disabling condition or are perceived by people around them to have such. That can be a double-edged sword. That can be a difficult because you can self-diagnose the way the law is written. However, when the rubber meets the road, you have to realize that a doctor is going to take a look at you. So a lot of people argue that the way the law is written opens the door for fakers, and it does. It does.
They're doing it now. I just had it today at Walmart with a lady who brought her dog in. He was peeing on One of the end caps, the aisle thing.
Oh man, that's so frustrating. That is so frustrating.
But look, you can spin your wheels all you want on this.
Mhm.
If it hadn't been written this way, then imagine the hoops us veterans, because we deal with the VA, would have to
Mhm.
go through in order to get a dog.
Oh yeah, yeah. Well, we have to
So
go. We have to go through hoops anyway. Um, and one of the big frustrations with the VA is that the VA is still arguing the uh, the VA is still arguing that there's no empirical evidence of the
because of that one
effectiveness.
study.
Well, here's the problem. Here's the problem. Most of psychiatry, it doesn't have empirical evidence. Uh, Psychiatry is based on theories that they then try to put into practice by affecting different areas of the brain with different chemical uh, prescriptions. And some people react this way to this drug, some people don't. You know, perfect example. There's a medication out there that was developed for heart for blood pressure called prazosin. And they tested that medication on Vietnam era vets back in the 80s, and most of the vets reported that their nightmares were less when they took this medication. So the blood pressure med. So psychiatrists, and I know this because one of my VA psychiatrists was actually one of the doctors that did this study. So the psychiatrists took on this med and started prescribing it for nightmares, and it helped people. But some people take it and their nightmares get worse. So where's the empirical evidence? Because you can prove both ways, you know. But when you look at the anecdotal evidence about PTSD service dogs and the veterans who use them, it's amazing the stories of lives changed that you see. It's absolutely amazing. And I've seen, I mean, I'm one of those stories. I was taking 35 psychological medication pills a day, 11 different prescriptions. 35 pills a day. You want to talk about a zombie? I could not function. I take 5 pills a day of 2 medications now because I use a service dog instead of trying to just dumb it all down with drugs. That's a huge, huge thing, which, that begs the question, well, why? Why is it that way? What's driving it all? And we can get into all kind of crazy conspiracy theories and stuff, but I'm going to tell you, if you follow the money, I can almost guarantee that when it really comes down to it, if somebody in the Inspector General's office really digs into why there's so much pushback against service dogs for PTSD, it's going to come down to money from Big Pharma. I can almost guarantee that. And that's a shame. No, go ahead.
There's a whole other area too. Is on the other side of animals, service dogs, etc., helping veterans people, and that is, look, me personally, one of the problems I had was having a reason to go home or to stay out of trouble. And this is before, I mean, I was walking around undiagnosed for years, and the people kept telling me to go to the VA, and, I was on that path that most vets are. There's nothing wrong with me, I'm fine. But one of the things I did when I was incarcerated the last time was talking to other vets there, was that I said, as soon as I get out, I'm going to get an animal, whether it be a dog or a car or a dog or a cat or something, because then I'm going to have a reason to go home because that animal needs me. And so that was one of the earliest, I will kill you, parrot. That was one of the earliest stages of me using the animals to affect a mental change in me and my behavior. And the more I explored. So there's a lot that goes along, and you're right on point about with the VA and the bigger companies, because everybody wants proof, this and that. But what you're talking about, it's like common sense stuff, and you're absolutely right. So you know where I'm going to stand when it comes to the rules and regs. I mean, I know most people can't be like me, but I have the freedom to do that. If it wasn't for that dog Scout, I don't
Mm-hmm.
know where I'd be right now, you know? I really don't.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. So we ended last time, we were talking about what to do when you're challenged unfairly or inappropriately trying to go into a place, like say into a grocery store or to a restaurant or whatever, with your service dog. I just dropped a link into the comments to the ADA's service animal Q&A. This basically is a rundown of the ins and outs of the ADA section on service dogs. Get to know this document. This has so much information and so much good knowledge, and um, it really helps simplify questions and answers. Does it mean that a business is going to listen and learn from reading this? Maybe, maybe not. But it is the actual interpretation of the ADA law about service dogs and their access from the government website, from the ADA. So, you know, I tell people on my page all the time, if you're gonna find a source, if you're gonna find a resource that talks about the ADA, make sure it comes from a site that says .gov at the end, because that's the actual source. That's the horse's mouth. It's what the government has put out about that law. And I'm a real stickler about that. If I put out a link that's not to a .gov site that discusses the law, I spend a lot of time researching it and making sure that what they're saying is accurate. Number one, if you're denied access, make sure you understand the ADA. And this Q&A here, it's only 3 or 4 pages long. It's not that long. It really does break it down, and it breaks down almost every situation you might run into that with being denied entrance. Now, go ahead.
You have some you probably have new people listening. I've got this up on the TV page. And for those who don't know, you might want to click, start off again with, it's really simple, 2 things before we go into how you should act when you get denied entry. But the ADA law is really simple, and it's clearly defined. What are those?
Yeah. People can ask you
those that don't know.
2 questions that they can ask you. Now, this is the way the law reads. When it is not obvious that it is a service dog trained to perform tasks for its disabled handler, people can ask 2 questions. So say your dog's not wearing a vest, then it's not obvious. They can ask you, is that a service dog trained to perform tasks to alleviate a disability? And what tasks is it trained to perform? Those are the only 2 questions they can legally ask you if they're trying to deny you entry into a place of business. If they ask you what your disability is, they're breaking the law. They're violating HIPAA. If they ask you to have the dog perform the task, they're breaking the law. Yes.
And this is where the problems begin. Now, how you act when you're approached. Now, if you go in Home Depot, Walmart, any of these big places, you're most 99% of the time not going to have a problem unless your dog or your animal is not acting normal, like a service dog would, by your side, listening to your task, and pulling, just a normal service dog. You're not going to have, most can probably guarantee up to 99% you're not going to have a problem. When you go to places that are mom and pop places, tiny little places, these people are not as educated or knowledgeable. So how you represent all service dog handlers and everybody will be based on your actions. And I know you could probably tell them, you probably would stay calmer than most. But how should you handle that when you do get somebody that's outside? How should you behave?
So
PTSDog.
You walk into the store with your service dog, and there's somebody else in there with their service dog, and that dog's obviously not well behaved. Is the dog attacking you or your dog? Is the dog doing anything to interfere with your day? If not, it's not your problem. It's up to the business to police the presence of animals in their business. Now, if the dog goes after your service dog, then obviously you have you have a little more involvement, but it's still not your business. So the best thing to do is go find management and say, listen, there's a person in here with this little dog, and we were over on aisle 16, and the dog tried to attack my dog, and that endangers your service dog, and other customers. At that point in time, the manager should be concerned because it is creating a danger for other people, and should ask to have the dog removed. You have to remember, service dogs are not robots. They're animals, and they have bad days. And the dog can be asked to be removed, but the handler cannot be denied service because of the dog. And it's also important to remember, too, that the ADA is not, the part of the ADA about service dogs is not granting any rights to the dog. The ADA is a civil rights law granting rights to the disabled handler to use the dog.
What do you mean? I've never heard that phrase that way. Why are you saying that? And
well, I'm saying that because people think, well, the law says I could bring my dog in here. That's not, I mean, that's sort of true. That's close enough to the truth that it scares a manager into saying, okay, fine, but don't let him pee on the aisles. That's not the case. The service dog legally is defined in the ADA, in the section of the law it is in. It is part of medical equipment, like a walker or a wheelchair or even an artificial limb. It's considered part of medical equipment. So you have the right as a disabled person to use this medical equipment in this establishment. If something's wrong with that service dog, if it's sick or not behaving or something, they can ask you to remove the dog, because the dog does not have any rights. The person has the rights. So if the dog is disruptive, the dog is not under control, or if the dog's having a rough day and the handler's not taking the appropriate steps to regain control, they can ask for the dog to be removed. That's on you as the handler. You've got to be on top of your dog. You've got to know what's going on with your dog. There are days when Skeeter and I just don't go places because I know he's just having a rough day, or he's not feeling good. And that's part of the thing that people don't get, is they think that the service dog law is a free pass to take your dog anywhere and do anything. And it's not.
You're right. And it's just a real quick reflection. For those who knew Scout, that dog had quirks. And, as trained as he was, he could not do Walmart.
Mm-hmm.
It was like, and there were times, and the only time I would take him into Walmart is if I was having a day where I needed him, but I couldn't be in there too long because his time limit was 2 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
Or, what I mean, 5 minutes in there. And by then, I had enough time to get my stuff, and he would be like, we're done. Because as much as, even if I put a vest on him with flashing lights and laser beams, I said, keep the fuck away from the dog. Sorry, keep the hell away from the dog. Yeah, so thank you for bringing that up. You have to know, that goes to what you've talked about in the past. You need to know your dog.
You do. And that's, and it goes back, I hammer, especially for PTSD service dogs or any psychological service dog. I really, really strongly believe in either owner trained or cooperatively trained. Excuse me. And let me define cooperatively trained real quick. Cooperatively trained dog means that you work with a program, but you keep the dog on the day-to-day basis. You're responsible for its care and upkeep. You're responsible for continued training. You go to 1 or 2, ideally 2 or 3 training sessions a week, and you then continue with that training throughout the rest of the week. But you're working together with the program. That's cooperative training. Owner training, you're responsible for all the training and everything yourself. Why do I hammer on that so much? Why do I think it's so important? Because, again, a dog is a living thing. You need to understand your dog the way your dog needs to understand you. And you can't develop that bond, that absolutely vital bond with your dog, if you don't spend time with the dog. It doesn't, you can't get to know somebody unless you take the time to get to know somebody. Same with the dog. Same with the dog. So, Ed, I'll be right with you on that. I have been avoiding all the big important things to say because we're having this great discussion. We'll get to that. Yeah, I know. But the bond that you create with your dog is absolutely vital. I mean, one of the biggest parts of one of the biggest reasons that Skeeter and I work so well, and I've been able to grow out of the things like the explosive anger attacks and the panic attacks in the store, anxiety attacks, is because Skeeter and I have been working together for 7 years now. 5 actively, him going into stores and stuff for 5 years. And we developed that. We grew together as he was growing up from a puppy, from a baby, into a young 18-month-old dog when we started to really work training. We developed that rapport where he understood Dad's voice is doing this, or he could tell on my blood pressure's rising, or whatever he picks up on. He understands, okay, this is what's about to happen. And I trained him when he started responding to that. I trained him to perform tasks to help prevent those stressors, those things that get you to that point where you're about ready to blow, from becoming a trigger. Because we all know what happens when the trigger gets pulled. Rounds go down range and things get destroyed. Skeeter prevents the trigger from getting pulled. He keeps it from becoming a trigger. Most of the time, we had a very, very rough visit to the store earlier this week. And this goes back to the radio show last night. Where was it? Reaper asked if Throat Punch Thursday was authorized, even if it's not Thursday. And that's, and that goes to, we'll talk about the t-shirt. People overreact when they see a dog walk into a store. Here, I live in the South. People really overreact when they see an Alaskan Malamute walk into the store. You don't see a lot of Alaskan Malamutes in the South for obvious reasons.
If you're getting reactions like that, there are things like tips that I would give. One is when how you walk. I was infantry, so I've got this look like I'm ready to kill people. It's my natural expression. So people, as on a whole, don't generally stand off when I'm not in a good mood. Lately, though, with running a farm, and I've got more of a cordial appearance. But when you walk in, it's just like being back in uniform in the days when you were in the service. Having that uniform on, I would hope, put you with your body posture and everything. Body posture, walking in with that dog under total control with confidence and all that. I mean, even if you're dealing with PTSD, you should be confident. You got your dog. You go in there and you mean business. You probably won't have any trouble, especially these big places.
Yeah, yes and no. I mean, you get that 1,000-yard stare going, you try to lock in and you focus on getting the mission done. Go in and get the mission done. Shopping trips or missions, right? Yeah. But there's always those special people, and as they say here in the South, bless their hearts, who, which is really a way, and any Southerner will tell you when you tell somebody bless your heart, it's really a way of telling them you're very stupid, aren't you? You always have those people who can't resist. Yeah, when Bo tells you bless your heart, he's telling you off, man. But basically, you have those people who just can't handle it. They have to go talk to the dog, and they're, oh my God, which is why I designed the t-shirt. And the t-shirt says it's a dog, not a unicorn. It says keep calm. It's a dog, not a unicorn on the back. And I'll drop the link into the. Are any of my mod squad on? Could somebody drop that link into the chat? If not, I'll try to grab it here. The whole point of the t-shirt is to try to draw people's attention away from the dog and the handler, and get them to realize that, you know, it's rude. It's rude to freak out when you see a disabled person walk into the store with their service dog. Would you freak out that way if you saw a disabled person roll into the store in their wheelchair?
Yes, they do that to me because my new dog, I don't have Scout anymore. So
Mm-hmm.
I've been taking, not a service bird, but I've been taking Yuli, or a little conure parrot, and I stuff her in my hoodie. And Walmart's really cool about the bird. So the bird could come out of the hoodie and ride on my shoulder. But lady did. She turned around in the register line, saw the bird, and screamed bloody murder. So,
Wow.
yes, I believe people freak out when they see it.
Yeah, yeah. Well, you know, and a bird is not covered by the ADA. It's not a service dog. You're absolutely correct.
But I'll do that the next time I see somebody that's in the
oh my God, a wheelchair! Holy cow! Have you seen a wheelchair like this? Look at this wheelchair! Oh, okay. Well, let's see. First of all, I just put the link in. Thank you very much, DV6, for your support in selling the PTSDog t-shirts. You can click the link.
Tell them about the t-shirt. It's really easy to find. It's right there on mydvstore.com. It's on our main landing page. And also, too, you know, if you can afford it, you can afford it. But his main goal with this t-shirt is, yes, it's bringing awareness, but he is trying to raise some money to get this outstanding book published. And it's, you know, us in the veteran community, you know, if I had my own publishing company, I wouldn't even charge him. In the civilian world, it doesn't work that way. So he needs to raise $5,000. If you want the t-shirt and to donate, there's appropriate information on the link for the shirt. But yes, the cost of that shirt is going 100% of proceeds to go fund this publishing. Is that correct?
Yes, it is going
and
to.
And I'm honored that you picked us.
It is going to. You have the book professionally edited, professional layout and design, photos, everything professionally done and professionally printed. Going to have to self-publish. This is called the first edition of the book. Hopefully, a larger publishing entity picks up the book after the first edition is published and prints it, and it's okay. Yeah. You have a puppy problem, and all the funds are going to publish the book. Also, there's a GoFundMe. If you don't want to buy a t-shirt, you can also support by donating to the GoFundMe. The patches, Catherine, yes, they go to support the book. I only did a very limited run of the patches, and at this point, am not really making a profit off the patches. I've kind of written that off as a loss. However, if we do future runs of the patches, everything I bring in right now is going towards trying to get this book published. I'm at the point now where once the fundraiser, which is going for 3 weeks and ends on January 5th, ends, and I receive those funds from dysfunctional veterans, I'll close out the GoFundMe as well if we've raised enough. I'm at the point where, in about 3 or 4 weeks, I will be able to hit send and submit the draft to an editor, to a professional editor. And just the editing alone is going to cost $1,800. The rest is for publication. And every picture that's included in the book, which I absolutely want to include pictures because, the primary audience is veterans and we can't read words real good. That's a joke, guys. It costs an extra $5 per photo being submitted for editing. These things don't come cheap. I understand why they don't come cheap, and it's hard to do by yourself. So we're trying to raise the funds. So let's get into the Q&As. And if you have questions, please submit them here into the comments, and I will do my best to answer them. Ona, yes, that's right. Behavior disruption is a valid task for PTSD, disrupting an emotional response. One of the things that's named is grounding. And you could teach your dog to ground you in many different ways. Skeeter sits on my foot. That's what I taught him to do. When you have a 100-pound dog on your foot, you have one choice and one choice only. Drop your hand down on the dog's head and pat the dog. Now, there's some empirical evidence that they have proven when you pet a dog, it releases endorphin, reduces the stress hormones, and calms you. So there is a medical proof that that happens. So that is something empirical that we can say in a response to a psychiatrist who says a service dog is just a crutch. There is empirical evidence that it does have some medical effects when you pet a dog.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, go for it.
I've got PTSD. I'm just your average vet. But what are the different types of things? Like you've named two, but do you have a handful that you could read off that you could teach a dog that can help alleviate the signs and symptoms of PTSD that you can teach a dog? What are some?
Sure, you can teach the dog to do several things. For me, personal space is a big issue. So I taught Skeeter to block. That means he interposes his body between me and other people, so that they don't get within a 3-foot bubble. Real hard to reach across a 100-pound dog to try to get to somebody. It's that people don't want to do that. Another thing that you can train a dog to do is watch your six. The hypervigilance, you're standing in line at the grocery store and you've got to look over your shoulder every 3 seconds because you don't know what's going on back there. You can train your dog to sit at your side or even between your legs, depending on the size of the dog. Or right behind you. That's how Skeeter does it for me, is he'll block behind me and watch the crowd behind me. And if somebody approaches too close, he bumps me. So that's a task. He's warning me, hey, somebody's coming up too close. He bumps up against me so that I have now been alerted that somebody's coming up. So I'm not surprised, and that doesn't snap from, immediately into a panic or a rage attack because somebody crept up on me. You can teach the dog to do something called deep pressure therapy. Deep pressure therapy is a medically, empirically proven treatment where the dog lays across your midsection and gives you, it releases hormones and endorphins and calms the body, calms your mind. It's a treatment that's used a lot in autism. They use weighted vests or weighted blankets. Well, the dog produces the same thing, and it might be a little more portable when you're going out and about than a big weighted vest or a heavy weighted blanket because it's got its own legs and moves itself around.
Those are good. I got a guy on the DV page that commented, and I was wondering if you could point me in the right direction. So he says he's stuck, Douglas Hutchison, he's stuck in a catch-22 with service dog regulations. The VA will train one for him, but requires he own it for 6 months first. The problem is his landlord will not let him have any dogs unless it's been trained and is a service animal. Is there somewhere that he could be pointed to, or
housing is covered by the Fair Housing Act and not AADA. The FHA HUD document law.
Have him message your page.
Yeah, have him message the page. That's something that's gonna. That's a long discussion.
I understand.
Yeah.
But
well, I'm going to drop the link to the document in there. Depending on your state, you may have some help with the law because some states, many states, offer the same access guarantee for a service dog in training um, that a service dog has. Now, hang on a second here. Let me drop this in real quick. Um, Here's an argument, though. Here's something that I want you to consider. Now, personally, I do not consider any dog that I am training to be a service dog under 18 months to be trained, quote unquote. However, training never ends because a dog is a living creature. I don't think Skeeter's fully trained. Skeeter probably will not be. I won't consider Skeeter fully trained the day he dies. We always learn something new every time we go out. But the ADA does define a level of behavior, a level of performance expected. You always have to tune up your dog. You always have to um, work through little issues. It is a continuous process, and I gauge the dog's level of readiness and level of training by the dog's behavior and its ability to perform its tasks consistently. But when you are dealing with public access, when you're dealing with going out in public on a regular basis, if you do not have the mindset that there's always something new to learn, you're going to start missing things, and you're going to start seeing slips in the dog's behavior. Because you as the handler have to be as active as the dog as the assistive device is. Handling a service dog is an active term. It is a verb. I am the handler. I'm not just the person who walks around beside it, but I am handling my dog. It is an active term. You have got to be as tuned into your dog as you need your dog to be tuned into you. It doesn't work any other way. You have to work together as a team. If you do not, if you decide, oh, dog's trained, we're good, you're going to start missing things. The dog's going to start missing things because you're not reinforcing when the dog alerts. You're not, dogs don't work that way. Dogs are not robots. A dog is, although it's considered a medical device as far as the ADA is concerned, it is not a machine. It is something that you interact with. And that's why PTSD service dogs are so effective, is because of that interaction. But again, that's a verb. Interact is a verb. It's action. It is doing. And that's another thing PTSD service dogs help with, is they get you to do things that you just didn't, you have to go out and walk your dog. You have to. You can't. I mean, I guess if you wanted to, you could train it to go potty in a cat box in the house, and you could stay isolated in the house. But that's not the way things work with a dog. Anybody who owns a dog knows it's an active thing. You've got to go outside. They've got to have exercise. That forces you to get exercise. When you're going out into public places, it's constantly training and practicing public access. There's always new situations when you're dealing with the public. If one of you doesn't learn something while you're out, then in my mind, if Skeeter or I don't learn something when we're out, one of us, then that outing was a failure. That mission was a failure, because there's always something new and different that you can bring to the table with your service dog. And you know what, the training and the working with your dog, the active interaction with the dog, also gives you something to focus on, gives you something to do other than what's going on in your brain. It gets you out of your head. And that's important. That's Travis Stickvat Landchild says that the PTSD service dog is one of the only treatments for PTSD that actually treats the veteran rather than the symptoms. And I couldn't agree more. It forces you to interact with another living being. It forces you to step out of your comfort zone, your isolated, clear fields of view, comfort zone, and it forces you to grow. It forces you to move forward. It does force you. I'm going to tell you right now, training your service dog, whether you're doing it cooperatively or if you're doing it owner trained, training your service dog forces you to do some introspection, some very painful introspection, to figure out what it is that is becoming a trigger. Figure out what the stressors are that are building up, so that so that you then have a panic attack or you have a rage attack. Figuring out how the dog can interact with you to prevent that in that situation, and then training the dog to do so. It forces you to grow. And that's, there's no cure for PTSD. A PTSD service dog is not a cure-all. It's not a miracle. Well, it is pretty miraculous. But what it does do is provide you with the tools and the ability to progress, to move forward, and to grow in spite of the disability. And that's important. That's very important. So I dropped in the link for housing with the FHA rules. Read those, be familiar with them. Check what your state's rules are if you're having trouble with a service dog in training being allowed in housing. A lot of states give the same rights to service dogs in training as the ADA, or to their handlers, let me say, as the ADA. So you need to check what your state's rules are, what their housing regulations are. Yeah, Arizona, Texas recognizes service dog in training. So if you're having difficulties with the landlord, go to your state housing authority, explain what's going on, that you're training a service dog, and ask if that dog if you have the same protection with a service dog in training as you would with a service dog. If you don't, via the state, the ADA does not cover service dogs in training. It only recognizes fully trained service dogs.
Some of the good things about some of the things we're actually complaining about are some of the best places that allow it's difficult to have, here's an example, this guy can't get a service dog because it's got to be trained first. Mm-hmm. It's cart before the horse or whatever. Mm-hmm. But there are great places that are very lenient, Mm-hmm. You can, like Walmart and Home Depot.
There are, and it's good and it's bad. I mean, Walmart is very lenient as far as dogs present in the store, but the reason why is terrible. It's because they're afraid of being sued. That's wrong. That's wrong,
Situation, so I forced him to go to Walmart.
Mm-hmm, yeah. But again, but that's just it. When you're working with the service dog, you're training the service dog, it forces you to get out. It forces you to interact. It forces you to step out of your comfort zone and move forward with yourself, with your life. And that's part of the healing process. No, it's exactly the opposite. I'm not real sure how to pronounce this person's name, but they say train pet friendly, educate businesses that they have the right to boot any dog that misbehaves. That's absolutely true. The businesses do have the right to ask a misbehaving dog to be removed. And that's something as a handler you need to understand too. If your dog's having a bad day and you're just not able to get that dog's attention, and the manager of the store comes and says, I need you to remove your dog, you're not being denied service. They're asking you to remove the dog because the dog is out of control and you're not able to regain control. That is perfectly within the limits of the law. And as a handler, you should know your dog well enough to know this is what's going on and be proactive and take the dog out yourself. And, if you have to, go back and leave the dog at home. If it's too hot to leave the dog in the car, go home, reset the dog, come back again later, come back the next day. It's
you have to deal with, this is the thing, life is not a piece of cake.
No.
Days and there are bad days with you, with the dog.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
There are days here, all the animals go nuts.
But again, it forces you to move forward. It forces you to find ways to function outside of that little safe, clear lines of sight, clear lines of sight, 360-degree view. Nope, nobody within 300 yards of the house hiding, hiding out and bunkering down. You can't bunker down when you use a service dog. It doesn't work that way. It gets you out of that. Yeah. Joe Kofta makes a good point about the housing not allowing the service dog in training. Emotional support animals are allowed in housing for disabled people.
And the only thing you need for that is just a letter from your doc most times.
Letter from the doc, yeah.
You need it for emotional therapy.
Yeah,
yeah. Piece of cake.
And you can make the argument it's not an argument. A service dog is not an emotional support animal. A PTSD service dog is not an emotional support animal. It is trained to do specific tasks to help alleviate symptoms for the handler. It is not an emotional support animal. However, that doesn't mean you don't get emotional support from having a PTSD service dog. That's not Skeeter's primary function, but I would lie if I didn't say that he does provide emotional support. He does, but he also provides tasks. Yeah, that's what I'm saying is, maybe talk to your doc about getting an ESA letter, because emotional support animals are covered by the FHA. Now this is what I want. I want a PTSD service dog. Yeah, it's a step in the right direction. Understanding that emotional support animal letter doesn't give you the right to take the dog into the store, doesn't give you access rights. That's not emotional support letter. Animals are not covered by the ADA. They do not have access the way a service dog does. So it's a slippery slope there, but that might be something. Message the page. I have a team of very well-educated, very knowledgeable moderators, very knowledgeable about the ADA, people who have dealt with things like this in the past, and then I myself as well can try to work with you and find some of the laws and try to figure this out. There's got to be a solution somewhere, and we'll try to help you find it. If you're using a training organization, talk to your training organization. If you're doing cooperative training with an organization like TADSAW has letters, legal documentation. TADSAW has all the tools you need to deal with that. All you've got to do is talk to your trainer and say, look, I'm having this problem with housing. I think any of no, it's not dead air. Not dead air. I'm looking at the comments. Curtis, I'm really disappointed that you're going to look at your fellow soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines that way, and that you're not willing to understand the assistance that a service dog gives.
I'm glad he made that comment.
That's disappointing. Yeah, it is. It's unfortunate.
It's the same thing I deal with on the other page. Somebody reaching out for help gets bashed because they're reaching out for help, which means that other people read that comment are going to be reluctant, or might be like, oh, I don't want to be a punk or a pussy, but you're not. You're not. So,
no.
Growing up is a good thing to try.
Yeah, PTSD is a very real thing, and it has very devastating effect on the people that suffer it. And it's even more devastating when people who are supposed to be our brothers or sisters deny it like that. Take a look back at your oath. Take a look back at apparently you're calling people pugs, so you were a grunt. Take a look back at the way you defended the guys in the trench next to you. And then think about the fact that everybody who served signed the same oath, raised their right hand, and swore the same oath that they would support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic.
In his comment, I think he misunderstood what we just said about the difference between a therapy dog and a service dog. And he's saying the opposite of what we said. You cannot take a therapy dog is not a service dog. We are not.
Therapy dog is a very different thing. A therapy dog is
not advocating
or an ESA. No, ESA should not. ESAs do not go everywhere. ESAs do not have access.
We're not trying to change that
Mm-mm.
there. So
Yeah.
just clarify that. I read his comment. I think he misunderstood what we said. So.
Nika Usher says I leave.
I'm not a pogue, by the way.
Nika Usher says I leave. You know what? I am a pogue, and I don't care. I still swore the oath and had the chance of death every time I was deployed. You know, so I wasn't out there grounding sand in between my teeth. Doesn't mean I didn't have experiences too.
That's a nice coffee mug you got there.
Isn't that fantastic? It's a DV Farm coffee mug.
That's awesome.
It's my favorite mug, man. Yeah. Let's see. All righty. Thanks for joining, Six. Really appreciate it. And once again, thank you very, very much to the Dysfunctional Veterans Organization for your support and for doing the helping me out with the T-shirts to raise the funds to publish the book. I'm really, really grateful. Really grateful.
Thank you for your support of the DV Farm here up in Gilsum and all that.
You betcha.
And, thank you for having me on.
You bet. Thanks for joining.
Push the shirt sales, and
I will.
I'll talk to you later.
I will.
Thanks for having me on.
I will. Have a good one. Thank you very much, Mike, for being here. Let's see if I can find the right button. All right, so we're going to wrap up. You know, there are a lot of people who are taking advantage of the law, taking advantage of things like the fact that certain companies are afraid to be sued, so they won't deny animals access. You're absolutely right. One of the biggest difficulties we have as veterans is taking service dogs into the VA. The VA in Washington, D.C. has published one set of rules that's supposed to be universal. However, it's not that way. You can go to one VA in one region and have everything be fine and have them understanding and accepting of service dogs, and go to another and service dogs aren't allowed in any of their spaces. That's something we are attacking as an organization. PTSDog is working on addressing that with the VA. My plan is early next summer to go to Washington, D.C., go to the Department of Veterans Affairs, schedule a meeting with Secretary Shulkin, hand him a box full of the books to distribute to his regional directors, and have a frank discussion with him about some of the challenges we face as veterans trying to use our service dogs at the VA. That is my plan. I'm certainly not going to be confrontational about it. I want to have a reasonable discussion with the man. But one of the biggest problems I've seen personally is the lack of consistency. Although Washington has put out a ruling, as it were, it's published in the federal record of how VAs are supposed to handle the presence of service dogs on their property. There is zero consistency from VA to VA. That's something that's one of the reasons I'm writing this book. Yes, you're right, Nia. Education is the only way to solve the badly trained service dog problem. You're absolutely correct. More laws won't fix anything. Criminals don't follow the law anyway. It's the definition of criminal. We're not even enforcing the laws that we do have correctly, and that includes the ADA. The only thing that's going to solve a lot of our issues with access, a lot of the issues with poorly behaved teams and things, is education, education, education. You're absolutely right. That's why I'm doing what I'm doing. That's why I'm writing the book. So it's 4 p.m. We've been on for an hour. Once again, thank you very much for joining me. Are there any more questions before I wrap up? Any questions about PTSD service dogs? Give you a couple of seconds here. I'll talk about it again. I'm to the point where I'm ready to get the book wrapped up and sent to a publisher. I'm going to have to self-publish this book, this version of the book, and that's expensive. That is costly. It's going to cost me $5,000 to have it professionally edited, professional layout, design, and then to print the first run of the first edition of the books. Doing that is not within my budget as a disabled veteran. However, as a community, through fundraising, hopefully we can achieve that goal of reaching that amount of money so that I can send the book and a check to the publisher at the same time, have it professionally edited, professionally laid out and everything, so that I can put a very polished, well-written, and well put together product in your hands as a tool you can use to help educate yourself and others about PTSD service dogs. In order to support, I'll drop the links again. Primarily, you can purchase a, I do have a GoFundMe. I'm going to drop the link here in the comments in just a minute. The pinned comment, you can buy a PTSDog t-shirt that says, keep calm. It's a dog, not a unicorn. The black and white is $20. Joe, yes, good point. Black and white is $20. The white t-shirt with blue and red, because it has two colors of ink, costs a little more to print, is $22.50, or you can buy one of each for $40 and save that extra $2.50. The other way that you can help is by donating to my GoFundMe. I am dropping the link into the comments right now, and then I'm going to address Joe's point, because it is a very good one. Joe Kofta says, tell everybody this online registration for service dogs is a sham. I've educated a few people who had no idea. Joe, you are absolutely right. There is no registration, there is no certification for service dogs recognized by the Department of Justice or the Americans with Disabilities Act. Period. There are a couple of reasons for that. First of all, like I said, service dogs training is never done. You can certify that you've trained this dog to do these things, but you cannot certify that the dog's going to do them forever. A certification is not real. And these people go and spend $65 and get a vest and a certification and an ID online. They're wasting their money. If you are faced with a courtroom because you tried to take your dog in somewhere and you were denied, and you pull out that certification, they're going to laugh you out of court. It's baloney. It's a sham. As far as registration being required, it is not. There is no legally required registration of service dogs, except just your dog license, just your city or your county dog license. That can be required, because that also guarantees that your dog has its shots. That's a proof that the dog is healthy and safe to be out in public. But you are not required legally under the ADA by any state, city, or anywhere to register your dog as a service dog. The reason for that is real simple. It's a discriminatory requirement. Think about it this way. Remember, the ADA is a civil rights law. The people who choose to use a service dog as part of their treatment for their disability under the ADA are exercising their civil rights. So if you then require them to register their assistive device, to be fair and equal, you'd have to require everybody to register their assistive devices. All wheelchairs, all walkers, all canes, all prosthetics would have to be registered. So then you have a case where you're registering disabled people. That's discrimination. The ADA is a law that's supposed to prevent discrimination. That's why there's no registry. That's the simplest way to break it down. It's a civil rights law. When you're required to register your assistive device because of your disability, you're essentially being required to register as being disabled. That's discriminatory. So yeah, don't waste your money buying a certification. If you're not sure if your dog's a service dog, message the page. Talk to one of the mods. I think all of the mods are either self-trainers or cooperative trainers who've worked together with the program to train their dog. We're all very experienced in the service dog laws and in the service dog community, and we're here to help. We are here to help. Thank you very much for your time. Thanks for following, guys. I really, really appreciate it. And please give some support, give some help. And one last thing, we broke 5,000 followers last night. Very grateful to all the people who followed, who shared, who helped try to spread the truth and the facts about PTSD service dogs. I'm going to tell you that what you get from my page, if I state it, I try to back it up with a link, with a source from the government. I deal in facts. I try to stay away from opinions, but if I give my opinion, I am going to say this is my opinion, or I'm going to say in my experience. And the book's the same way. I back it up with facts. So thank you again. Any questions you have, any issues you have, because we do have a moderator squad, we have the ability pretty much real time. If you're having an access issue and you need some help finding the laws and things, message the page. We can do that. We can respond pretty quickly. We're pretty good at it, and get you information in your hands on your phone immediately to try and help get you through the access informations, the access issue you're having. We'll see you again in 2 weeks. We'll do another live Q&A, and please continue your support. Keep an eye on the page, and thank you very much. Have a good day.